Welcome to Mental Health Matters. My name is Barbara Meyers, and I'm the host of the show. In this evening's show, we're going to be talking about depression. I'm very honored and pleased to have two guests with me in order to discuss this topic. Christy Baker is someone who has had depression, and she now lives with anxiety. So welcome, Christy.
Thank you, Barbara.
You're welcome. And Bob Hogan is someone who is recovering from depression and alcoholism. And I'm very happy to have him on the show as well. Welcome,
Thank you.
Bob.
Thank you, Barbara.
So what I thought I would do is to start talking about what depression is, what clinical depression is. It's not just feeling sad, because everyone has sad times now and then. It gets to the point of being diagnosable as clinical depression. What the symptoms are is that you've had 5 or more of the following symptoms for 2 weeks, which causes impaired functioning of yourself in your normal way of life. So here are the symptoms. You have a depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day. You have diminished interest or pleasure in activities that you normally engage in. You have significant weight gain or weight loss without dieting. You have insomnia or hypersomnia nearly every day. You have agitation, you're very fatigued, you feel worthless or guilty, you can't concentrate, and sometimes you have thoughts of suicide. So if you have 5 or more of these for 2 straight weeks, that's when clinical depression can be diagnosed. This subject has a special meaning for me because I have been living with depression for nearly 30 years, since the birth of my daughter. I had a serious postpartum depression, and I ended up over the years being hospitalized twice for it. It's very important to me that we discuss this subject on this show, so I'm very happy to have 2 guests here that are going to tell their stories. First, I'd like to ask Christy to tell her story.
Thank you so much. Talking about depression is hard to even remember because one of the things that I found with depression is that everything became a blur for me. Back in 2000, 2001, I suffered from major clinical depression. I had been having some challenges in my life and some emotional things that I was already seeing a therapist about. And then I experienced an accident at work, and as a result of some of the medications that I was put on for a very, very severe back injury, my brain chemistry was changed and I was thrown into a severe depression. And to this day, there are chunks of time in those years that I don't recall. I would have conversations with people, I would participate in activities, and it very much felt like I was alone, even in a room full of people. And that was when I could get out the door. For me, depression very much was a dark night of the soul. And I think a lot about the advertisement that gets on TV for antidepressant medications that says, where does depression hurt? Depression hurts everywhere. Who does depression hurt? Depression hurts everyone. And there's a lot of truth to that. Depression very much hurt those around me. I had friends and family members that could not understand why I wouldn't return phone calls, why I wasn't showing up for family events. They kept trying to see me. My partner had a terrible burden in trying to hold our lives together and pay the bills and clean the house and cook. And a lot of days I couldn't get out of bed. And on the days when I could get out of bed, it took a real effort to shower, to go outside, to walk the dog. Simple things. When previously I had been an administrator and had juggled hundreds of details for a church office. And I think for me, I really felt that loss of being able to focus, the loss of being able to concentrate on anything. I wanted to sleep all of the time. I was exhausted no matter how much sleep I had because it was restless sleep. I would grind my teeth at night, so my jaw would ache and hurt in the morning. My muscles were tense. My immunity was low. I was catching every cold that came around. And a real low point came for me when my partner begged and pleaded with me out of a sense of not knowing whether I was going to kill myself and commit suicide. And I ended up going to a doctor at my partner's urging, and I broke down in tears, and I cried when I went to fill out the paperwork that merely asked for my name and my address and my insurance information, because it seemed too overwhelming. I felt as if I was being asked to climb Mount Everest by filling out a form at a doctor's office. It felt like I couldn't do this, and I was sobbing all of the time. And I remember it often felt to me as if I was never going to find a way through this. I was never going to be able to get to the other side. I was never going to be able to find a way clear through the darkness. And it was only through people continually reaching out to me, through church members coming to see me, through my partner's love and support, through the companionship of our animals at the time. That was a big comfort to me. Through wonderful doctors and therapists and all sorts of alternative practitioners, that I was eventually able to very slowly recover. And it was not a clear line of upward recovery. There were stops and starts. There was trying this medication and then that medication and then readjusting dosages and having side effects and experiencing all of those things. So it was actually a large number of years, I would say. And to this day, while I would say that I no longer struggle with depression, I still struggle with anxiety and panic attacks on occasion if I'm not getting enough sleep or I'm under particularly stressful circumstances.
Thank you very much, Christy.
Thank you.
And now we'd like to hear the story of Bob.
I'm a analytical kind of guy, so I go back in my background and analyze things. The self-help book would call my family dysfunctional. It was, my father worked a lot of overtime because he liked the work, he liked the money, and he liked to be out of the house at certain times. And my mother was a bored housewife, so she drank. And that was one of the reasons he liked to stay out of the house sometimes. And I was the second son, so I was destined, according to the model, to be an overachiever, seeking attention from the remote father and seeking acceptance from a family that really didn't exist. My dad would be hospitalized on a number of occasions for depression, and he would get shock treatments, and if they were administered right and he was lucky, he would come back out of it for a while. Later, my mom would drink more often. I was a moody kid. Went to high school. I tried to get some good grades. I figured my out from this situation was to get into a good college and get a good career. But I was shy, but I worked hard, and I got great SAT scores, but I ended up at the State University because I didn't have the other things to balance that out. And anyway, I went and took a little manicure. I took a couple more classes than I should have, actually twice as many classes, and that made my grades go down, and I had some problems with professors because I was walking around in a beard and sandals in the middle of winter. They didn't think that activity was too... Was I a little manic, maybe? I don't know. At any rate, the draft board got me in 65, so in the Army for 3 years. And I survived. I came to California when I got out. I spent some time in retail, but I discovered that money is to be made in outside sales, direct sales, as we called it. So I was in outside sales, and I got married at the age of 27. And I would finish my degree, going to night school at the state universities. I did well into my early 40s, selling more than other people. I was overachieving, just like I was going to be there, like the little engine that could. Overnight, the technology changed. I was selling computer add-ons and stuff, and my income fell, and the wife started to get on me. She got to me and discovered I was feeling down. I was burned out. I thought for sure I had the early onset of grumpy old man. But I had lost all my judgment, that ability you need to make decisions, be assertive, which in sales and having a business you have to have. I was slower. I was dwelling on the past resentments. I felt guilty. I didn't know for what. In a fog. That was the big thing. I felt lost. I was the loser. I was hopeless and helpless. And then, cognitively knowing and having read these self-help books and had psychology classes, I knew my parents had mood disorders, that they had a brain chemistry problem. And I had their genes, and I grew up in their environment that they more or less created or didn't create. And I had married a woman that had the very same possible problem as my mother. And it would take a graduate class in psychology to reveal to me that they both lost their fathers at about the same age. So they have this unresolved grief, and they take it out on me. In fact, my wife takes everything out on me. Her sisters, she's had 2 sisters and 3 sisters and all that stuff. At any rate, I was depressed. I was drunk. 45 years of age, I looked in the paper and there was an ad. Described me perfectly. And it was for drug study at Stanford University. They wanted people to come in who description. So I called and I got an appointment. And I interviewed with a couple researchers' assistants and then finally with the psychiatrist who was in charge of the study. He had a perfect questionnaire. We talked through it and I knew what he was talking about and everything. He says, "You're clinically depressed." He says, "But you're not depressed enough for my survey." I suspect it was because I hadn't made it in on the first try. Then you have to come out and get me. But he said, "There's a new medicine out, an SSRI antidepressant, and it would help you a lot. You can get them from your general practitioner. Samples are out all over the place." And at any rate, he suggested, we talked about my drinking. He suggested I had to give up the drinking because the meds and the alcohol conflict, and they would just cancel out the benefit of the medications. So I had to give up drinking. So what did I do? Did I want to stay in a fog? No. I went and got the samples from my general practitioner, little 10 milligrammers, and I gave up drinking by going to AA. Not right away. It takes you about 90 days before you all of a sudden decide that, I can't drink. That's the clue to this. Who's serious about that bit? So it got me out of the fog, the combination. I came back for more samples, and the doctor offered me 20 milligrams. And I said, "No, I can handle this. I'm tough enough, and I can rough it out." And but I came back, and I realized my brain chemistry. It wasn't my character. It wasn't my deficiencies. It wasn't my fact that I was a loser that was doing this. It was just my brain chemistry. And so I took the 20s, and it helped more. And I went out and got a job, and for a while, and then I had lost that job, and I went to the county mental health, and they moved me over to a new brand of SSRI, and that was fine. I think possibly at that time I started cycling, slightly manic, back to depression, and I had a car accident. It elicited some PTSD from my past, and so they moved me into a 30 milligram test. And that's about when I was 52, a couple years later, I decided I'm going to get full medical care, so I'm going to go to the Veterans Administration. I'm a veteran, so I should take advantage of that. And I was getting old, and I was going to fall apart if I didn't get the proper care. So I went down to the VA and signed up, and the social worker doing the intake told me that didn't tell me, actually. He wrote it on the intake form, that I was bipolar. Later, when I got a copy of that, I was going to argue with him, but then I thought about it, and the psychiatrist had put the same thing on her evaluation, too. And I had to agree she was a little better qualified than he was. They added a mood stabilizer to my regime, and I had to think about it, but it was right. When I reflect on my life, trying to be an overachiever, actually spending years running straight and getting depressed, running straight and getting depressed, running straight and getting depressed. I have cycled through these moods quite often. And so now we know that SSRIs are also known to cause slight mania in some patients when they're given to you without a mood stabilizer. So it's probably a good idea if you start taking a Paxil or Prozac or Zoloft or one of the SSRIs that you get a mood stabilizer, even if you don't have a history in bipolar in your family, as I do, mood disorders. But I did raise my kids during these years, and I got much more involved than my father ever did. We went camping, we went on trips, I coached their soccer teams for 12 years. I was active in their scouting activities when I could. I even joined a men's group to explore what a man in the world today should be doing. And I enjoyed and got something out of all those activities. Kids don't think I did much, but you didn't have to overachieve like me. Anyway, the first psychiatrist at the VA, she was interesting. She was from India and classically trained, so she'd spend 50 minutes with me taking these detailed notes of my responses to her questions. Now, the newly trained psychiatrist will spend 10 or 15 minutes at the most, and they're just seeing how the side effects of the medications, they're checking on my general attitude and health. And it was at the suggestion of two social workers at the VA that I applied for Social Security disability, and I was accepted, which was nice, because now I have an income. I take my medication. I sleep 9 hours a day, take 3 small meals, don't overeat. I go to the gym for an hour, hour and a half 3 times a week. And I keep my mind busy. I read, I watch educational TV, and I have a spiritual component to my personality. I'm not a member of a church now, but I have been from time to time. And I've done some meditation. I have a sense of humor. I have to. I married my mother. Oh my gosh. And I do belong to a DBSA support group. And I'm actually a facilitator now, so I do help out that way. And I don't accept stress, particularly from that roommate of mine. And I do use the serenity prayer very often.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you letting me tell my story.
Yes. What I'd like to do is ask both of you, what gave you hope when you were down? What is it that continues to give you hope? Because this is a journey that we're on usually.
Absolutely. I know for me, I very much get hope from my faith. I'm a Unitarian Universalist. I'm in seminary in my second year. So there is recovery. You can go on to have a very full and productive life as someone who has experienced depression and anxiety. And I think that I also have hope in my relationship. I have hope by being engaged in the world at large and appreciating nature, appreciating the wonderful gift of creation. So a lot of things.
Good. How about you, Bob?
Very similar to values that I have about an individual's worth and a spiritual sense that we're all part of God. I basically enjoyed being around people all my life, and while I didn't bounce around and show it at the time when I was very depressed, I did understand that I was a worthwhile person. And that, so when I sought help, of course, it was aha. It was an aha moment for me with that ad in the paper. But it would help if you have insurance. health insurance, or you knew how to access the state health, which I know this is on your website. So that's good.
I think the first thing that gave me hope was when I was in the hospital, being hospitalized for depression, and just thought that was the end of my life at that point. And I saw someone who was there who had been very ill when she had first come in, and I saw her get better, and I saw her eventually leave the hospital, and I could see how much better she was. And I thought, maybe there's hope, and that just seeing that example of somebody, was what gave me hope. I think you answered a lot of this already about what helps you living with depression. The kind of way you take care of yourself physically and spiritually and emotionally, and also, just going to the doctors and following what they say. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I think Bob answered a lot of that.
Structure, maybe?
Structure to the day.
Yeah, structure to the day.
Keeping stress low, making sure you get enough sleep, all of those things.
Yeah, good. Now, both of you have had situations where someone in your family has been living with depression. What is it that you think that family or friends could do for to someone who is living with depression?
Well, for me, I think one of the most important things is to recognize that every single person's symptoms and depression shows up differently, and so not to overgeneralize. While you can say these are the things that depression looks like, I think it's really important that you recognize that each person handles things differently, their symptoms are going to show up differently, and having a tolerance for that. And I would say, too, that there's a real difference from experiencing depression yourself and what it's like to be in relationship with someone who experiences depression, a loved one, whether it's a family member or a partner or a spouse. Sometimes it's harder because you're not the one in control, and you're trying to help someone else, and it's so frustrating to be on the other side of that.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of work.
Having a lot of patience and caring.
What would you advise someone to do if they became seriously depressed?
Seek help.
Seek help.
Professional help.
Absolutely.
I think a psychiatrist is the key.
Yeah.
A lot of plans you have to go through a general practitioner, but they should, or their partner should insist on seeing a psychiatrist for the mental health feature.
I agree with that. Yeah.
General practitioner might just try, like I say, an SSRI, which may work for a while, but it could induce a manic episode, which can make things worse. So.
Yeah, that was my experience too, of having a general practitioner give me something that actually ended up making things worse. You know, not intentionally, but not just because he wasn't up on the field.
Yeah.
I think too often people wait until it becomes life or death and critical, because there is a sense that if I just try hard enough, I can handle this. If I push hard enough, I can handle this myself. And there's a pride, and I think it's a false pride, and you don't want to acknowledge I need help.
There's a stigma too.
Absolutely.
I know in myself, it was my self-stigma, I can't be depressed, looking at myself as a problem.
If I fell and broke my arm and or cut myself, it would be foolish not to go to some place to get it treated. But when you're struggling with depression, you don't classify it in the same way, and so you think that, I can just do this.
It's more like diabetes is something you have to seek help because it affects your whole body and your whole mood, your whole life. So you better get the help and take the medication.
The last thing I'd like to ask is whether there's been anything positive that has come out of you about this experience. I know for myself, the lessons that I learned, they came much later, of course, than the actual episode, but I learned the value of humility, of authenticity, of patience, of hope, and eventually of creativity and how that could play a part. And I was wondering if you have identified anything positive that has come out of the experience. I know it's hard to do when you're in the midst of
very much so when you're in the midst of it.
Yeah.
But for me, it absolutely set me on the course towards ministry. It gave me a much greater sense of compassion for other people and for the sense of brokenness, and that we are whole because of our brokenness as well as our health. So compassion, I would say for myself, a greater sense of faith and trust out of that experience, that if I can survive this, then I will be held in some fashion. There is a tomorrow. There is next season. There will be a time when things will look better than they did in the midst of that darkness.
That's great. How about you, Bob? Anything you'd add?
I think she's covered it pretty well. I think that there's a depth to my character now that maybe wasn't there, a spiritual sense that wasn't there. I think just as important is that, I don't feel I'm responsible for the whole world, and I can't take care of it because I'm no longer that overachieving little boy.
Yeah.
But I think it's changed me.
Yeah. Before we leave, I'd like to point out some resources and organizations that might be helpful to you. There is a national organization called the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, DBSA. The website is on your screen. They have chapters in Alameda County, in Berkeley, Castro Valley, and Pleasanton. There's also the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI. That is also a national organization that has chapters in Alameda County and Pleasanton. There are a number of support groups on the website of my church. And there's a suicide hotline, 1-800-SUICIDE. Sometimes people have suicidal ideation when they have depression, and it's very important for you to recognize this and to take action as soon as something like those thoughts come to you. I want to thank our guests, Christy and Bob.
Thank you.
And to end the show, I'd like to say, take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Thank you for watching.